Hey Immigrantly family, it's Sadia and I want to share something that I think is genuinely exciting. The Wilczek Foundation is accepting applications for their Wilczek prizes for creative promise in culinary arts in 2 categories, food and beverage and media and storytelling. And guess what? They are specifically looking for immigrants doing this work. Here's who they are looking for. You have to have been born outside the US to non-American parents, be 38 or younger, and have at least 5 years of professional experience. It could be chefs, artisans, food makers, for media and storytelling, writers, academics, content creators, even podcasters. 6 prize winners will each receive a $50,000 cash award. The deadline is May 4th. Learn more and apply now at wilczek.org. That's vilcek.org. Your story deserves to be recognized. Hey everyone, welcome back to Immigrantly. I'm your host Sadia Khan. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment because this episode is a special one for me. We are revisiting a 2022 conversation that I look back on with so much pride because the woman I was sitting across from was already extraordinary, and now the rest of the world knows it too. Zainab Hasnain is a Pakistani-born, New York-raised DJ and producer. When we recorded this episode, she was deep in the grind of New York's underground scene, playing clubs and warehouses. Fresh off opening for Riz Ahmed in Brooklyn, she was someone you needed to know. The world just hadn't caught up yet. It has now. Since our conversation, Zainab has played Boiler Room, Governor's Ball, and she opened for Palestinian-Chilean artist Elyanna across her entire North American tour in 2024. A massive run of sold-out shows coast to coast. She was also featured in the New York Times in a piece about the new landscape of dance music. She was chosen for the Gap's summer campaign, and as of last summer, she was booked at European festivals including Junction 2 in London, Jazzene in Zurich, and O'Days in Copenhagen, all while quietly developing her own original music, testing tracks in her live sets before they hit streaming. The girl who started with second-hand turntables from a teacher's car trunk is now playing festivals across the Atlantic. And honestly, none of this surprises me. So listen to this conversation and you'll hear exactly why. Here's our 2022 episode with Zainab Hasnain. Don't forget to come back next week for a new Immigrantly episode. Until then, take care and be kind to others. Welcome to Immigrantly. I'm so excited to have you here. And you were delayed by the subway, which is not surprising to New Yorkers. So what happened?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. And yeah, I mean, how do you even explain what happens with the subway? The subway just is the subway. That is the explanation.
Right.
Even with giving yourself extra time, there's no guarantee you'll get somewhere on time.
Absolutely. And it's the same with traffic. Like if you're driving into the city, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes West Side Highway is all blocked and it's so frustrating. I wish there was some other way where people could commute in New York.
Walking is my favorite way of commuting.
Not bad. Or biking. If
Or
we
biking,
had biking lanes, proper biking lanes. We don't still have them.
Not across the city. In certain places, it's easier, but sometimes you'll get on a main road and there'll be no bike lane. And
Right.
you might get run over by a car or truck, so you have to be extra careful.
So I was browsing through your Instagram I believe you were in Pakistan.
Yes,
and
I was.
It was a visual delight.
Thank you.
You took so many beautiful pictures and the clothes that you were wearing and the food that you were eating. And I wish I was there somehow, if I could be transported. How was the trip?
It was amazing. It always fulfills me every time I go. And I made a promise to myself to never go longer than a year without going back to Pakistan. But it was wonderful. I spent a lot of time with family, of course, eating a lot, traveling around. Eating was the priority.
That's always the priority, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me, you were born in Pakistan,
Yes.
but then you grew up in the States.
Yeah, so I was born in Lahore and I moved to the States when I was 5 to New York, Long Island specifically, but I moved back to Pakistan when I was 11 for a year and a half about, just to do some schooling there. And it was kind of a back and forth with my parents not really being sure where to put down roots. But we ended up coming back to the States and I moved to the city when I was 16. So I've been here most of my life.
And your parents live in
New York, yeah, in Long Island.
They live in Long Island, which, would you consider it a burb, or is it like,
yeah,
it is, right?
Definitely hardcore suburbs. Yeah. I always wanted to leave the suburbs. I used to go to the city a lot as a kid. Never for parties. I never was allowed to go to parties or, fun teenager activities, but my sister and I loved going to shows in the city. So we were big. I mean, we've been into music since we were kids, and that was our way of going to New York, going to different venues, even before we were 18. And I knew from a really young age I wanted to live in New York.
Is your muffin butter?
Let's talk about music, Zainab. You are a DJ.
Yes.
You write about music, which is so impressive. And I love your moniker, ZEEMUFFIN. Is there a story behind this?
It's so funny. Every time I get asked that question, I feel like I should have a better answer to it because there really is no significance to it other than Z is just a nickname that most of my friends and some family call me. It was Z, and then the muffin was just truly random. I loved the way the word muffin sounds. And it was a silly inside joke between a friend of mine in high school. We would write down our favorite sounding words and muffin was one of them. I remember I just made a Twitter account when Twitter first launched and it was just ZEEMUFFIN and that was it. I just stuck with that. There was no significance behind it. I just thought it sounded cute. It was very memorable. So
and why not?
That's it. Yeah, why not?
It sounds cute and that should suffice.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did you start? What drew you to working in music, and especially DJing? Because whatever little I know about DJing, it's a very gendered space and it's basically co-opted or taken over by cisgender white males.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong.
So how did you break into that? And what was that journey like?
Yeah, it started with my love for music. So it was just from going to shows and being into all different types of music. I feel so lucky that I moved to New York when I did because, as you know, New York is the creator of hip hop, the hometown of hip hop, and so many other styles of music. Jazz, New York is the cultural center of the world, in my opinion. So it started with just being exposed to different types of music by going to shows. And that was everything ranging from punk, hip hop, indie music. I had a really wide variety of genres that I was into. And I also was classically trained in viola. So I played classical music growing up. Shout out to my mom who took me to so many different lessons my whole life. And I was also a dancer. So I used to do Kathak dance and Indian dance growing up. So I really just loved the expression of music, whether that was through playing music or dancing or going to shows. It was just something I knew I wanted to be around. And as I got older and I went to college, so I went to university at NYU, I would go to different parties and shows, and I was still really young. When I graduated when I was 20, so I was never able to legally go to clubs. But that didn't stop me. I would see how DJs would control the energy of the room and how the entire night was really determined by the quality of the music played. I thought to myself, because I had such a love for so many different types of music, and I loved creating a positive energy that other people could feed off of through music, I naturally gravitated towards that as an art and thought, okay, like obviously I love playing viola, I love playing music, but to me, DJing felt like storytelling. It's a mode of storytelling, and you get to also exchange energies with other people in the room. And I was like, I want to know how to do that. So that's kind of how I got into the art of DJing.
So when you're performing, what kind of audience do you enjoy?
There's no particular kind of people. I think it's just anyone, really, who loves music. I like to be around people who are there to enjoy music, to dance, and to have a good time. And that can be any type of crowd. New York is notorious sometimes for having a tough crowd. For example, if you go out somewhere in London or in Europe, I've generally noticed that people love to dance, like really come out to dance. Whereas that's not necessarily the case everywhere in New York City, but there are definitely spaces in New York City where people are like, I'm out to dance, you know? Or, you know, New Yorkers are kind of notorious for like standing in the corner and judging you silently and like bopping their head.
I'm one of those New Yorkers. I wish I knew how to dance. So for me, it's my lack of expertise, I guess, or understanding of dance itself. I do live vicariously through others who are dancing and who are doing it unapologetically and without any concern or regard for whoever is looking at them or whatever is going around them.
Oh, you don't need to know how to dance. You just need to know that you want to move your body. And that's it. I don't think you need to have a skill for dancing. Or even if you are standing in a corner nodding your head and that's your way of appreciating the music, then it is what it is. But as someone standing up there and playing music, the best moments are when someone is vigorously dancing to the music or comes up to you and says, oh my God, that was like the best night of my life. I had such a good time. That's when it's so rewarding and feels so fulfilling. And that's why I love doing what I do, because I get to meet different types of people and play all different types of music and connect with so many different personalities and groups. I just feel like it's a never-ending discovery of community and sounds and how things translate in different spaces. And it's just it's endlessly interesting.
So you DJ'd for Riz Ahmed recently.
Yes, I did.
In Brooklyn. Just an FYI, we've been trying to get this person on our podcast for the last 3 years. So if anybody is listening who can connect us to Riz Ahmed, why not? How was that?
It was amazing. I'm so grateful for that opportunity, and Riz is such an amazing collaborator and artist, and it was just so great to work with. We had a sound check, several rounds of sound check before the event, and it was so great. He was just so friendly, so energetic, and so grateful that I was even doing the show for him. And I'm like, I'm grateful that you're making me a part of this. And to your point about DJing being heavily white, male, cisgendered, I just felt really appreciative that another fellow Pakistani was reaching out to not only another Pakistani, but a woman at that, because there's very few of us Desi women. And if you get even more specific, Pakistani women who DJ. Maybe I don't know them. So if you're listening to this and you're a Pakistani DJ or an aspiring Pakistani DJ, hit me up because I want to connect. But there's probably, like, I can count on my two hands how many of us exist. So it was amazing to just have that platform and that opportunity and to connect with other like-minded artists and people. And of course, Hassan Minaj was also there. It was amazing to see him and connect with him and so many other Desis in our community. And the energy and the feedback I got was so wonderful. And it did a lot for me personally in just getting my name out there. So it was really amazing.
Zainab, you said that there are very few Pakistani DJs. Do you think it's more cultural, or is it, and an extension of culture would be people prefer traditional professions for financial stability or security? Or do you think there is some other reason?
I think there's many reasons, and it comes down to the individual at the end of the day. But I know the likelihood of me pursuing this would have been much lower if I had probably lived the rest of my life out in Pakistan. It would have been much more unlikely that I became a DJ or that I pursued something in the arts. And by proxy of just living in New York City, which is such a creative artist community city, you're inspired much more on a daily basis to kind of pursue these things. And for anyone in Pakistan, as you know, you have to be sort of in a position of privilege to be able to pursue something in the arts because the economy and the way of life there is completely different from what we're living in America, and the opportunity is just so much more limited. So you do have to be in a position of privilege, not only in terms of access to getting platforms to play in Pakistan, because there's not very many. And as we know, there is sort of this elite bubble in Pakistan and for artists as well. Of course, there are artists who start from the ground up, but there's very few who didn't come from money, or not even money, but have some sort of connections. This is not a shot on any artists in Pakistan who are doing it. There are plenty who just started from nothing. But I'm just saying it's a lot more rare and it's a lot more difficult. And the actual expense of DJing, buying equipment, that's another aspect of it.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so when I got started, I was working in investment banking. I was 19 or 20.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 20 years old and I had just started my career in investment. That lasted 8 months. But I used the money that I made at that job to be able to purchase a DJing course at a school that was called Dubspot. It doesn't exist anymore, but I used that money to go to this night school, basically, and build a network there and eventually start to buy equipment. And I started really cheap, $200, maybe $150 turntables that a teacher at the school had laying around in his trunk and gave them to me. And literally a 2-channel mixer with no EQs. It was nothing. And that's how I started and really hustled and put myself out there and started to upgrade the equipment. But this is to circle back to what I was saying, that it's not a cheap hobby and it's not a cheap thing to get into. Of course, the equipment is maybe a one-time investment, but you'll end up having to upgrade it. So that's one aspect of it, just the accessibility and the privilege and the price of sort of getting into this game. The other aspect is even me as a woman putting myself out there. I put a lot of videos up on TikTok related to DJing and all types of other things, but the comments that I get sometimes from literally only men, maybe some women sprinkled in there, internalized misogyny, will be like, oh, your parents know that you DJ or you're out in these clubs. The judgment and the sexism and the misogyny in our society, in Pakistani society, the patriarchy that exists is still so prevalent and entrenched in our psyche that it takes a lot of confidence and a lot of I don't give a fuck what you're saying to continue going. And it can really get to you, I would be lying if I didn't say that some of these comments sometimes get to me. But at the same time, I'm like, well, you continue to live in your little small-minded world, but women are doing things that are just like men. And honestly, because we're emotional creatures and we know how to read emotions and to feed energy, we're better at it than you are. So that's my thought around why I think not a lot of Pakistanis get into it. And the other aspect you mentioned of security, that's 100% another aspect, because we are conditioned and taught to pursue secure careers like being a doctor, engineer, lawyer, the holy trinity.
Right.
And anything else, I think bankers in there now, and, marketing or big tech, those are all acceptable areas to be in. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you genuinely enjoy it. But there's this guilt also as a layer of being a woman, where you're fighting this constant guilt. And as your podcast is called, Immigrantly, as an immigrant, to make sure you're fulfilling the desires that your parents had set out for you. But I think there's other ways to fulfill those desires and to make your parents happy. It's just that they're not necessarily used to seeing these types of things.
Zainab, I'm curious. You said you were in investment banking. And I wonder what headspace were you in at that time? Because from investment banking to music, tell me if there is any connection that I'm missing.
Oh, there's no connection. I just graduated and I needed a job, and everyone around me was recruiting into these banking jobs. And I studied political science and economics at school and had nothing to do with banking. And I had no idea what I wanted to do as a job, but I did know I wanted to be in music, which wasn't a job necessarily. So I used that as a means to an end. It was like, okay, this is going to pay my bills. And I've had like so many jobs since then. After investment banking, I worked at like a mini startup. I worked at the DJ school. I worked for Andrew Yang. I worked for Esther Perel. I worked for Spotify for almost 5 years. And that was really great too. Working at Spotify was an amazing experience because it was still working in music while DJing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I realized, and this is not a shot to anyone who works in corporate America or enjoys the structure of a 9-to-5 job, it's just not an environment that I had thrived in. And I was doing a disservice to myself by not pursuing being an artist full-time.
Zainab, let's talk about hip-hop. Now, I have very limited knowledge of hip-hop, but I am fascinated by this music genre because it brings together two things that I value the most, activism and art, right? So this was a medium which was created to express feelings of exclusion and has been defined as a culture and a lifestyle rather than a music genre. That's something that's been established. Now we see a lot of South Asians using this tool of expression to tell their stories about racial inequities, social inequities, religious inequities, especially in the post-9/11 era of over-surveilled communities and exclusionary immigration policies. And I wonder what kind of vernacular are South Asians incorporating into hip-hop, which may or may not be similar to what other communities have experienced or used?
I think that, to your point about hip-hop being a marriage of art and activism, I think first and foremost we have to acknowledge that hip-hop is a Black art form and was created by the Black community. And as we know, Black Americans are disproportionately at a disadvantage in every aspect of society in America. So that is kind of where hip-hop came from, in addition to this art form of breaking, right? Breaking is a big part of hip-hop, and what I mean by breaking is breakdancing. So taking breaks from different songs, looping them, and that's how, DJ Kool Herc in the Bronx, 1970-something, don't quote me on the year.
I think it started in the 70s.
In the 70s, in the Bronx is where hip-hop was born. But the beautiful thing about hip-hop is it has expanded outside of the Black community into other underserved communities. And not even communities, but individuals who just have a story to tell. It's a storytelling art form, right? And a vivid one at that, but also maybe with some fantasy involved, depending on the type of artist that you are. And that's the beauty of it. It's like, it can be anything you want it to be. And for brown artists specifically, first of all, hip-hop has become the biggest genre in the world, period. I think it's become a little synonymous with pop almost, right? If you look at top 40 on the radio globally or in the US, it's mostly hip-hop. Hip-hop is dominating the charts, and it has been for the last 10 years, and it's going to continue to dominate it. So it is just now an art form that any community can opt into and kind of make their own and tell their own story. So for the brown community, I think it's different. It's different from person to person. If you're speaking specifically about Pakistanis or Indians, like coming from like India, from the gutter, as I like to say, or from the gutter of Pakistan, I think it's so beautiful and interesting to use that as an art form to tell their story and in their own native language and in their tongue. And hip-hop has spanned borders. There's French hip-hop, there's German hip-hop, and it's all so localized and nuanced, and it's not the same. So like even New York hip-hop versus Atlanta hip-hop, two totally different styles. It's just something that's...
What are some of the differences, say, between New York and Atlanta hip-hop?
It can be between the beats and the cadences of what the rappers, their flow, for example, right? So Migos, who were an Atlanta rap group, rest in peace, Takeoff, they developed this cadence of rapping that was really unique to Atlanta. And their beats, it's trap music. So Atlanta is kind of like responsible for trap music and making trap music globally accessible. Whereas New York has a different sound, where New York rappers might rap over drill beats, and drill beats are a little bit faster and more aggressive. They have like a different style of rapping. So you can kind of hear it. Like Pop Smoke is the quintessential New York drill rapper versus like Young Thug is a quintessential Atlanta rapper. So even from region to region, it's so different. And then even within New York, you have like New York drill. And then you just have like classic old school New York hip hop. There's Joey Badass is doing that sound still in 2022. So it's like, it's even within New York, within cities, there's different nuances. So for Desi rappers, I think it's, again, it just gets so localized to you could be a Desi rapper in New York. You could be a Desi rapper in the UK. You could be a Desi rapper in India or Pakistan. So it's so nuanced and different, and there's no like one size fits all. And that's why it's so hard to put hip hop in a box and define hip hop as this one thing, because it has naturally evolved like all art forms do. And all art is just an interpolation of other art, right? So it's just what the artist wants it to be.
So tell me, what about hip hop resonates with you as a DJ, as an artist? What part of hip hop really speaks to you?
So when I first started listening to music, I think punk and indie music was really what punk rock really is what I gravitated to first. And like punk is this sort of like stick it to the man, anti-establishment, anti-authority type of genre. And I really resonated with that as a young Muslim woman growing up in New York, because it was like this space for me to let loose and be free without judgment. Other people who think like that and want to be like that. And part of the punk community is like moshing and going to shows and literally letting your body just like let loose and crowd surfing and all of that. And like, I feel like so much of what hip hop has is similar to punk. Like that idea of anti-establishment, anti-authority. I saw a lot of crossover in punk and hip hop. And I remember I naturally sort of gravitated towards hip hop after that. Tribe Called Quest was one of the first groups I really got into. And I just gravitated towards the storytelling, towards the wordplay, and especially towards the beats. I loved like the underlying beats that were in hip hop. And it was unlike anything I had heard. And it's evolved so much, like I said, and has changed. And every year, every month, there's something new, something fresh, something exciting, a new voice, a new flow, a new subject matter, just a new perspective. And I find that so fascinating and so interesting. And I'm just drawn to the ethos of what hip hop represents, which is, storytelling, speaking your truth, anti-establishment, just being your real raw self.
That's so interesting. And that's what draws me to the idea of knowing more about hip hop. As I sit here and listen to you talk about different iterations of hip hop, there's this wealth of information and knowledge that you're sharing with us, which is incredible. But at the same time, we hear from older generations about hip hop being vulgar and superficial. How did that come about?
Well, I don't think it's completely untrue in certain spaces. I mean, okay, so I like to use Mobb Deep as an example, right? So Mobb Deep are a duo from New York, old school hip hop duo. And if you listen to a lot of the lyrics from Mobb Deep, they're pretty violent and graphic.
More drugs, mostly thugs. All of my thuns, they baby mom, daughters and sons. Dog blocks, from street lamps, shot the fuck out.
Even from Notorious B.I.G., from Biggie. It's like graphic storytelling, right? But that's part of the art. And it's also interpolated from their own lives, from their real experiences. So to equate that to being just on a surface level saying it's vulgar without really trying to understand where it came from is so reductive and unfair, because Biggie is like, people are still blasting Biggie, and it's for a reason. This man changed the direction of hip hop and defined what New York hip hop was. I mean, a lot of artists have defined what New York hip hop is, including Jay-Z. But I like to use Biggie and Mobb Deep as examples because this is their way of telling a story. And it's really complex, and it takes different twists and turns, and maybe they use vulgar language or they tell something a little graphic, but that's part of the journey. And sometimes I do think there's some hip hop out there that's like lazy and misogynistic, and I'm not going to sit here and deny that. But that's not the core at which it started. But it is true that as with any genre, there can be artists that are just lazily, adding to it and not really growing the subject matter. And the irony is that some of the artists who are not vulgar then get clowned on for being too clean and too, PG. And so it's like, how can you win?
But if it is about storytelling, Zainab, then how can we box what should or shouldn't be hip-hop, right? Because then if somebody is, expressing their story through clean language or narrative, that should be part of hip-hop. Or if they are using certain language that may be offensive to other people, even that is fine, right? Because it's, at the end of the day, somebody's lived experience that they are sharing through music.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how hip-hop transcends boundaries, geographic boundaries, language, cultural barriers. But how far do you think hip-hop, or to what extent do you think hip-hop can grow even more to soak up other cultures and to become more inclusive if it hasn't already?
I think it already has. I don't think it has like a problem with inclusivity. Maybe if you're talking about the music industry or, men versus women and sort of men supporting other women, there's very few male hip-hop artists that will look out for other female hip-hop artists and put them on their songs, feature them in their albums. So there could be more of that. And I think there could be a lot more collaboration across borders, across sexes. There's so many ways in which that could develop. But I already think that that's happening. And it's just a natural evolution. And it's like watching a child grow. You just have to let it figure its life out and try new things and experiment. And, we can't try to make it move in one direction or the other. But one exciting thing is to see how many more women are dominating hip hop right now. Right now, women are the stars. If you look at Glorilla, for example, if you haven't listened to her album, it's amazing. And it's so New York. Like, it made me excited. There's another hot New York rapper out there. And what I love is that Cardi B supported her and hopped on a song. And that's the type of shit that I want to see. I want to see other women lifting each other up and collaborating with each other and continuing to own this wave of women that are dominating hip hop. I love to see it. And it's really the golden age for women in hip hop right now.
So do you think women are supporting more women versus men supporting women? So it's different across genders?
I think so. I personally think so, yes. But there's exceptions, of course. There's male artists who are amazing and collaborate with upcoming artists. Like, for example, there's that song, London, with Bia and J. Cole.
I'm in London, I like to go and shop at the mall, shop at the Prada, shop at the store, shop in the drop and stop at Dior.
I love that collaboration because Bia is a relatively new player in the game and J. Cole is obviously a seasoned veteran. So to have him hop on her song was obviously a really great look for her. And that song, with or without J. Cole, is amazing. So shout out to Bia for that banger. But that is an example of what I call like camaraderie between men and women rappers. I think we could stand to see a lot more of that.
Zainab, let's talk about hip-hop in New York specifically, and I want to link it to gentrification that's happening, especially culturally dense parts of New York. So there is this very specific, almost unadulterated trait to street music, street scene, hip-hop, right? How do you think gentrification will or has already impacted hip-hop? And are we at risk of loss of authenticity in those areas?
I think that there's always a risk of that especially when this is a Black art form, right? But like I said, I don't think there's gatekeeping in this community. Like Eminem, for example, is one of the most successful rappers on the planet, who is a white rapper from Detroit, who had a lot of personal struggles, So his story was just, he respected the art form. And another thing is he respected the community that brought him up. So, for example, I remember, without naming names, there was a brown rapper who used to drop the N-word in his music. And that's no, like that's a hard pass no. What gives you the idea that you could possibly say that on a track and get away with it? Like that's not for you. That'll never be for you. And you should never be saying that word, period, whether on a track or in real life or to your friends. And that's the gentrification aspect, which I started to see with a lot of like non-Black rappers, just using like Black vernacular. That's not for you. So that is one thing that I'm just like, like nip that in the bud quick, right? And that goes for white rappers too, which I think less and less white rappers are. I don't think that's as much of a problem as it was maybe a couple of years ago in that aspect of gentrification. And then there's like the privileged rappers, right? So maybe someone who just wants to make hip hop, and that is quote unquote the gentrification. It's not necessarily from a story of struggle coming up from nothing to something. But I do think that there's a space for that too, because sometimes you're just making hip hop. You're expressing yourself through this musical medium. That's not left for me to interpret whether that's good or bad. That's really for society to decide. But that's just the natural evolution of things.
Yeah, you're right. And in my mind, I'm thinking more about socioeconomic privileges that accrue to certain communities and certain individuals, and how does that dilute the ethos of hip-hop in general, right?
Right. I see what you're saying.
But as you said, there's room for everyone to experiment within this music genre. Let's talk about your writing. Now, you've written for different music magazines and as a reviewer, and you've interviewed as well.
Yes, I started off actually when I was at NYU. I used to work for an arts magazine, or do that on the side. It was an extracurricular, and interview different artists.
What's the most rewarding part about interviewing up-and-coming artists, or just sharing physical space with them?
I love speaking to other artists, other people in general. I am just inspired from hearing stories of how someone started their journey in music or where they're headed in that journey. And it's always so special to be just a little part in that journey. And you'll speak to someone when they first started, and then 5 years later, you'll look back at that conversation and they've completely skyrocketed in their career. And that's amazing to see, and to have that conversation of like, where did they start? How are they doing this? What are the different methods of focusing and creativity? And it's just, the more you know, the more you have the power to grow yourself. And everyone is so different and brings different perspectives. So I'm grateful to every artist that's shared their space and their time with me to tell me about their creative process and their story. All it's done is just inspire me and motivate me to continue to keep going.
Do you have a preference, DJing or writing?
I don't have a preference because I've been doing both my whole life. I think it's just what I'm feeling in that moment. I'm just someone who likes to storytell through any medium, really, whether that's writing, making a mix, cooking, photography. There's just so many different mediums in which I like to express myself. So I have no preference per se, but I just want to express as much as I can through all these different mediums.
On your website, you quote Chef Anthony Bourdain. It says, "What we eat and what we listen to, it's what we are."
Yes.
And I love this. I couldn't agree more. I don't know how to cook, but I love to eat good food. What do you think music and food have in common? Or what are some of the vital features that bring diaspora together when it comes to music and food?
I think music and food are the two spaces or the two mediums in which you bring people together, in which you commune as a group of people, as community. Music brings people together. So when you go to a festival or you go to a show or you go to a DJ set or you're listening to something with someone, that's an act of sharing energy together as a community, right? Exchanging energy, exchanging love between two people or a group of people. And it's the same thing for food, especially being Pakistani. As anyone who knows who's listening to this, who's Asian, Pakistani, of any culture, really, food is how we come together. Food is how we communicate. Food is how we show love or withhold love. Food is the biggest expression of ourselves, I think.
Love and care,
love
compassion.
And care. It's everything.
It's everything, yeah.
When Anthony Bourdain said that, I forget, it was like in an episode, he just said that offhandedly to someone. And I was like, just light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, I've never heard a truer statement in my life. Sorry, excuse me. And when you go to a restaurant, right, sometimes you're listening to music. There's music playing in the restaurant. It's all this like multi-sensory experience of just all your senses are heightened. And I think that food and music so naturally cross over and really are the greatest way to bring people together.
Zainab, what is on your Spotify playlist?
So I'm actually doing a monthly Spotify playlist called Muffin Tops. So every month it'll be like November Muffin Tops, December Muffin Tops. So I'll definitely share that with the audience listening. And it's just things that I've been, not necessarily that have come out within that month, but things that I've been gravitating towards or music I've been listening to. So right now, what's currently on my playlist for November is this artist, Asake, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, a Nigerian artist. So I would say it's like a mix between Afropop and Amapiano, which Amapiano is like South African house, interpolated from a lot of like New York music, actually. I'm really, really enjoying his music right now. And then Channel Tress, one of my favorite artists. Incredible crossover of house and hip hop. And if you haven't seen his live show, incredible. So there's a song, 6 a.m. he just put out. I'm pretty sure he's dropping an album very soon. So this is a single from the album. That's another artist I'm really loving right now. And then Salt, that's spelled SAULT. They also dropped an album recently, and there's this one song, Glory, that's just like a journey. It's amazing. So that's just a sneak preview of the top 3 songs on my playlist right now.
So I'll be listening to all these songs on my way back to the burbs. So Zainab, in the end, if you were to define America in a word or a sentence, how would you do that?
I have a word, but it's so cheesy. So let me think about this. America is opportunity.
True.
That's how I see it. America is opportunity.
For some, at least.
For everyone. I think for everyone. It's what you make it.
Yeah. This was so good, Zainab. I am so glad we were able to do this despite all the subway delays you were here, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You know, as I was revisiting this episode, I realized how relevant and timely it is even today. And I'm so glad I got to share it with all of you. Just an FYI, Zainab Hasnain is leaning more into her original name, Zainab, and moving away from ZEEMUFFIN. Her Instagram now is _Zainab NYC. Just making that correction because, again, the episode was from 2022. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share it with a friend, a family member, someone who listens to music or is an aspiring DJ. And don't forget to come back next week for another important immigrantly conversation. This episode was produced by me, Sadia Khan. The editorial review is done by Shay Yu. Our sound designer and editor for the rerun is Lou Raskin. Immigrantly's theme music is by Simon Hutchinson. Other music by Epidemic Sound. Come back next week and be kind to others.